Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another edition of Real Talk here on MTA International. Today we're going to be having a look at multiculturalism here in the UK. But first of all, I want to thank Amir for helping to present the last program. I'm sure you agree did a fantastic job. Don't forget, you can always get in touch with us via our website and email to let us know what kind of issues you want to discuss here on the program. Now I'd like to introduce the panel that I'm joined with here in the studio. First of all, I have Andrew Pelling. Welcome to Real Talk. Andrew was a former independent MP for the Croydon Central area. Welcome to Real Talk. Next, I'm joined by Suzanne Shakes. Welcome to Real Talk. Suzanne is a teacher here at St. Joseph's College. And last but not least, I have Rob Berkeley, who's the director for the Runnymede Trust. Welcome to Real Talk, all of you. So that is our panel that we have. And as usual, we've got a studio audience here as well to add in their points of view throughout the discussion. Now, before we actually start with the discussion here, we want to hear what the general public think about multiculturalism. So let's take a listen to the word on the street.
Appreciation, acceptance and respect for different cultures and traditions is essential for us. It is important for us to integrate with people from different backgrounds in order to achieve a peaceful, harmonious society. With over 500,000 people immigrating to the UK every year, tolerance and understanding is essential. However, respect for diversity isn't just a problem for us here in the UK. It's a cultural and social phenomena that needs to be dealt with collectively on a global scale. Lack of understanding and respect for different cultures is detrimental to our social lives. Are we able to preserve the uniqueness of our culture or nation and still integrate with people around us? I've come out to the streets of Morden to see what the public have to say. Do you think multiculturalism has failed?
I don't think multiculturalism has failed. I think it's a very young experiment. I think it's clearly the future for this country. I mean, Great Britain has been built on immigration for 1,000 years. Immigration built this country, it built the wealth of this country.
No, I wouldn't say multiculturalism failed. I think it works. I think that everyone has come together. There's lots of communities in London that are of people with different ethnic backgrounds.
Do you think we're living in a divided society?
Yes, I think we are. Yeah, but I don't think it's divided on racial grounds, actually. I think it's divided on socio-economic grounds.
There's lots of people who have lots of friends from different backgrounds. I wouldn't say that people are divided, no.
To what extent should people be willing to drop their own faith and culture to fit into the society?
Oh, faith and culture. Personally, I don't feel anyone should be dropping their own faith. Culture you can modulate, but faith, I won't be for dropping it.
I don't think anyone should drop their faith or culture, but I do think they should try to fit into society.
No, you shouldn't drop your faith. Whatever you are, you should keep till you die.
So that was the word on the street, and we're going to get the discussion started off here in the studio. Andrew, if I could turn to you first. I mean, David Cameron recently made some comments about multiculturalism, and he's particularly talked about multiculturalism here in Britain, and he said that it's failed. I mean, what would you like to say against that?
I think his speech was most unfortunate, particularly to give a speech like that in Munich. Right. To talk about a state doctrine of multiculturalism, I think was not the right approach. I think there's always a great danger that when politicians are in trouble, they play the race card.
Right, right.
Particularly in London, a place where we won the Olympics on the basis of being a very diverse society, a city where multiculturalism, to some extent, has worked. Yeah. I think was really bad news for the UK.
It's interesting you mention that because when we were trying to get the Olympic bid, I mean, we talked about London being multiculturalism, and I remember just a couple of years ago, David Cameron was saying that we're living in a broken society, and he coined that term. And it seems to me that politicians just seem to use it whenever they feel for their purpose, their own agenda.
I think you're right to identify that the tone changed a lot between what was said before the election and what was subsequently said in that speech. If you were to make a speech about the place of minorities within the UK, it would have been better perhaps to have spoken about things like the poverty and the lack of opportunity that some ethnic minorities have. But you know, it's a danger that you end up saying, taking an old-fashioned approach, that you've got to fit in.
Right.
And having a monoculture rather than having a multicultural approach.
Suzanne, turning to you, I mean, we've got people viewing all over the world. Can you tell them what Britain is like in terms of a multicultural society, and what is it like to live here?
I'm the first generation of West Indians that were born here. My dad came over in the 50s, right, as a lot of West Indian parents did. And I thought they came in, they tried to integrate into the system. Sadly, some of that went okay and some of it didn't. Mm-hmm. But we were raised in my particular family to think of all people. We're all one big family. And coming from a mixed race background, you know, we were not allowed any opportunities to think about that. However, I think as things have gone on, yes, there's more mixing going on, but then there's also so much segregation going on in the communities as well. From a school point of view, when students come into school, start off in primary school, they play with anyone. Yeah. They have no problems running around doing things with others. As soon as they start to hit that secondary school, then the feelings and thoughts of their parents tend to then come into them. They take on some of their parents' thoughts and values, which sadly may not be the same as their own, but they want to belong to their family first.
So you're saying it's not a natural thing for people to stick to their own groups, it's actually forced onto them by parents and other people?
And a lot of it is due out of ignorance. Okay, people don't know about other cultures.
Okay. Rob, turning to you, I mean, firstly, could you just give us a brief overview of what the Runnymede Trust does and your work within that?
Yeah, Runnymede has been going since 1968, looking at issues around race equality, race relations in this country. And so the issues around multiculturalism have been kind of central to our work for a long time. For me, it's almost like complaining about the weather. I mean, we are a multicultural society. In fact, Britain, as a state, is a multicultural. England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, coming together. So what becomes interesting is when suddenly you overlay a pattern of race and racism onto that kind of multiculture. And then it's about singling out certain groups and saying to certain groups, you don't fit in. And that, to me, is a problem.
I mean, that's interesting. But I mean, let's you know, face the facts. Here in the UK, we do have people from all different races and societies. But people say, you know, they stay within their own social circles, and they almost sort of ghettoize. You know, people live in certain areas, and that's all they know. And I think recently the discussion has been to get people to integrate more. And I mean, why do you think people stick to themselves and almost, you know, live in certain groups and don't really actually get out into the wider world?
Well, firstly, let's understand what the real problem is with this. I mean, I think often people talk about segregation and automatically talk about race when they could talk about class. People move to places where they feel comfortable. There's services around them. It might be a church or a mosque that's nearby that they want to use. The challenge is that people need those groups for support individually, but also shouldn't be constrained by those groups. They should be able to work right across the board. Otherwise, we don't benefit from the diversity around us.
Suzanne, you seem to be agreeing with that. Is that something you'd like to?
When we talk about living in our own communities, it is the support you get from from the people that you know. It's your family. You're going to stay close to your family. So especially if you're you know, young parents, you want to have the support of your, you know, your mum, your dad.
So then if you do get that support, then what's the point of actually going out? What are you gaining? What are the advantages to actually promote mixing and you know, interacting with other people from other backgrounds?
You learn so much. I mean, I've been really privileged and I've been able to travel. And I think nearly all of us on this panel have been able to. And that's one of the things I'd like to impart on the students that I teach, give them the opportunities to go see beyond, so they see what else is out there. And every culture has something unique to offer. That's what makes us all different. And together, we do make a prettier picture. If you just put, say you have a garden and all you had was daffodils, they're beautiful, my favorite flower. But if I mix them in with some roses and some pansies and different colors and you see them all together to bloom, that's a much nicer, you know, garden than it is if it's just one thing.
Interesting, I like that metaphor. Okay, let's move to the audience now. We've got people here from different backgrounds as well. What is it to be multicultural in Britain? What do you understand by that, and do you think it's working? Let's get something to you.
I think that in Britain, the issue of being multicultural is very hard because it can be pigeonholed as black people mixing with white people, but it might not necessarily be like that, because your culture can be your social upbringing. So it can be people of, say, a family of old money mixing with a family of new money, and that may not always work. So we need to think about the issues concerning people.
Yeah, but you as a young person looking to the future, I mean, we are the future generation for this country, right? Do you think it's your role to actually integrate, and how far do you think that is happening at the moment?
I feel that as the generations go on, integration happens more and more up until a higher age, whereas before, like Ms. Sheikh said, it would have stopped maybe when you get into secondary school, but now it may stop where you hit university. So we just hope that in the future it can push forward so that throughout people's lives they'll be integrated into different societies.
Let's get some more points of view. Yeah, what would you like to add to that?
I think integration stops and starts at different stages. So as you grow up, it starts and you start mixing everybody. Then it stops when you form your own group in secondary school. But although it can still mix in your area and where you are, but then again, when you go into a workplace, you're open to a lot of religions, culture, and everybody else. So you got to start up again, and you find new traits in people which you may lack, and befriend friends out of people like that.
Okay, fantastic. Let's get some more points of view. Would you like to add anything? Got the microphone there. What is it to live in a multicultural society? Do you think it's working? And do you think people actually judge each other on race anymore? Because Britain puts itself out there as a modern country that's got rid of racism. You know, we think we're above that now. And do you think that's actually true?
No, I think that people do judge each other on just the way your race, what your race you are, and certainly your culture as well, like where you live or stuff. People put a certain stereotype to you, and then many people just deal with that stereotype with just acting it out, not trying to break through and acting with other people and stuff. So.
And looking to the future, how do you think we can get rid of that, and how do we think we can improve on that?
I would say just people being able to accept that there are different races and there are different cultures, but not acting as if there has to be a segregation between the two.
Fantastic. Yeah, please add something to that.
I think also, and the media has a lot to answer for.
Okay.
Whether we like it or not, I mean, and I know we always go back to the music, but, you know, when you look at some of the music and what they're talking about and how they're dressed, the ones with the hoodies, where did all this come from? We were watching it on TV. You're seeing them, and they are the gangsters on TV, or the wannabe gangsters. It's like the dress that people wear. You know, why do certain women wear certain things? Because they think it's going to make them look, you know, a certain way and attract certain men.
Right.
So a media has an awful lot to
So do you think the media is actually a barrier in creating a multicultural society? Or do you think
it can work
helping?
both ways. Shows like this, for example, who are giving an opportunity for all cultures to talk. And then there are shows which say, you know, they feed on the stereotype, and they do it in a negative sense. Right now, the big controversy is about the little Rasta mouse. I don't know if you've heard about that on TV. It's a little West Indian mouse, and it's on CBeebies. And there's so many complaints that, you know, look, it's a stereotype. Well, you know, I'm from a Jamaican background, and I think, and my dad did, we actually watched it the other day and thought it was the greatest thing.
Yeah.
For once, we are now seeing ourselves, the West Indians, portrayed in this, and it is a positive thing. He's solving crime and doing something.
Right, okay.
Yet some people were up in arms about that.
Andrew, how would you like to comment?
It isn't just about race. No, the reality is that this country is still a country of great privilege. Right. You know, if you look at the cabinet that's running the country, there are more people in there who came from one school, namely Eton, and there are more people in there who came from one college in Oxford, Magdalen College, Oxford, than there are from ethnic minorities or indeed from the Islamic community. Right. So, you know, you can understand there being resentment within the community that people's opportunities are capped by being in a society of great privilege.
Okay. Rob, I mean, just turning to you, moving the discussion forward a bit, to get a multicultural society, you need to get people to integrate. And I mean, coming from an ethnic background myself, some people feel that the worry with integrating is that you lose some part of you. For me to be British, I have to lose some part of what it is to be a Pakistani Muslim. And that's how other societies have reacted to it. So what's your views on that?
Well, I think there's something quite powerful in thinking about what we're trying to do in this society. I mean, societies across the world really struggle with ethnic difference, leading ultimately in some really harrowing cases of genocide, like in Rwanda. Here we've got a really exciting project and a really exciting opportunity to be where 1 + 1 can equal 3 and not 2. I mean, so I can bring what I have from my culture, you bring what you have from yours, and actually we create something new together. And that's a really positive thing and a really positive message, which we're not really getting from our politicians and our leadership at the moment. But people, in their lived experience, I think, feel that. So just yesterday, a Sri Lankan heritage man offers me a jerk chicken bagel, right? You see in that, the whole kind of new creation of new kind of mixes that create new positive things for society.
So, I mean, if that's a fantastic thing that you've experienced in this country, why do we have our ministers saying that multiculturalism isn't working and that, you know, we need to look at something else?
I think it's, firstly, it's an easy target. There are some in our society who really do not want multiculture and feel very challenged by it. And so it's very easy for a politician to be on their side. So we see the English Defence League marching in Luton at the same time that David Cameron made a speech on multiculturalism. I think that there's a political aim to this. But when politicians play to their best, like in gaining the Olympics, we saw that moment where you could say, we are the world. London is the world in one city. Isn't it a wonderful thing that we can create together here, rather than kind of splitting people and trying to divide.
Suzanne, turning to you, I mean, you mentioned before you've had a chance to travel. Is this a discussion that's only happening here in the UK, only happening in London, or is this something that every country out there is actually dealing with?
Every country is dealing with it to different levels. I think what we've got here that's not seen as much in other countries is the class system as well. Here, you can be a millionaire from the East End and you're still from the East End. You know, you're still going to be thought of as lower class compared to someone who's born into money. Whereas, let's say for America, where I lived for several years, money will take you to Hollywood, to different places, and it's all about how much you have. But the whole culture thing is going on, and in everywhere that you go, people are trying, but as long as you have leaders that feel that they are above and people are below, it's not going to change. It needs to start at the top. Yes, we can do a lot of the grassroots things, and we as teachers can, you know, do all these lovely things that we do in our PSHE classes and get them to learn about different races and to mix with cultures. But unless it's going to be continued at home and it's going to be continued at the jobs and continued in government, it's going to be capped.
Okay, I want to bring the audience back into the discussion. Just before I get your point of view, I mean, we're talking here about you know, educating people. You're talking about educating people in this. Within your schools, in your lessons, do you think you're educated enough? Do you think we talk about it enough? And how, you know, how effective has that been? Whatever discussions you've had in school and colleges about the topic.
In school, you tend to have about one PHSC lesson a week. And in this PHSC lesson, you're showed in each lesson different cultures and different ways in the world and in the religions to bring in together as one. And in conclusion to this, that brings together, like, no matter what colour you are or religion or culture you have, you're all together and alike.
But don't you think then that you're just being force-fed a message that you have to integrate and you don't, you know, that
I don't think you're force-fed. I think it's just whether you want to accept the knowledge of other people and awareness around you, because some people don't want to accept that we should all integrate and be together, and other people want to, because it's a good thing when somebody that's not from your culture recognizes something from yours, like whether your food or your language, and you can both experience that together, and that can lead to further better things and not just stay in the one thing.
Okay, fantastic. Let's get some points of view. Someone hasn't said anything yet. Yeah, go on.
I do believe in PSHE lessons that they do open your eyes to the fact that you can learn from other religions and cultures and other backgrounds and profit from it. But they do leave it open, as in whereby you have to go and mix with them. They don't enforce in you that you should integrate.
Okay, yeah. And anyone else would like to add something in? Yeah, let's get one more point of view. Hey, John, you'd like to add in something? If you just take the microphone.
Well, I don't think that schools actually teach enough about integration, because in school there's like one lesson, and usually no one really pays much attention to it. And different schools say different things.
Right.
Like I go to an all-girl school and they prefer to focus on girl issues rather than speak about mixing cultures and stuff.
But in terms of culturalism and everything we're talking about now, do you think it's something that you need to teach in a school? Because at the end of the day, it affects you outside of a school. Isn't it something that you learn just through life lessons?
I think it is something you learn, everyone sort of naturally knows.
Okay, all right. Rob, you'd like to add something to that?
Let's get real. We live in a globalized economy. Capital moves all around the world. People are going to move all around the world. We have an opportunity here to set out what the modern societies are going to look like, and they will be mixed. So we've got to deal with it. The question really is what the state ought to do. And I think some of the things that the state does, that the government does, aren't helpful to creating spaces in which people meet. So it's almost a shame to say it, but in this space. But the question about whether we have more faith schools is an interesting one, and one we have to make some kind of decision about collectively. The decisions about who is a teacher. So only 2% of head teachers in this country are from minority backgrounds. That's a problem. So few people in government are from minority ethnic backgrounds. We have to make progress on this because we need to create a society that works for now and the future, and
so
not
Rob,
one that leaves people behind.
I mean, if that is the problem, how would you actually fix that? I mean, would you hire someone to be a head teacher just because they're from an ethnic background to balance out the statistics? How would you actually fix that?
But I think there is talent out there that we're not using fully. And I think that's true in teaching, but right across the professions. We have, for example, the bizarre situation last year of only one Black Caribbean student being admitted to Oxford University. Right? Just one out of the 3,000 students. I think that is a real problem and something that we need to make sure that we address. After all, they're spending our money.
Right, okay, Suzanne, yeah?
I think going on from what Rob said, in the school, we'll take our school here for example, there are no minorities in senior management. We have one lady, let me take that back, so I guess that's a minority. But there are no ethnic minorities.
Right, okay.
And yet, our school, basically 2/3 of the students are from ethnic backgrounds.
Okay.
And I think in every school, a child should be able to see himself and know where he or she can go. They should be able to say, look, I could be a head teacher because I can see it. And it's not that we want to just give these people the jobs, but we do need to start at this age, secondary school age, giving these students the opportunity to progress in education. Yes, if this person doesn't have enough money but has the brains to do it, what are we doing to promote that child so he has an opportunity to go to university?
So you're saying that's not happening at the moment, and that's what we need to do?
It's not happening enough at the moment, and the hoops that so many students have to jump through to qualify for that. And even teachers, with minority teachers, the amount of hoops we have to jump through, and sorry, but sometimes it is seriously who you know.
Okay, all right. Andrew, turning to you, I want to get your experience from working in government. And before we were talking about the sort of state multiculturalism that's being imposed, what are your views on that? Do you think it's something that's being forced down from the state? And what are government trying to do to actually help multiculturalism?
I think that it was something that was accepted as being very good public policy.
Right.
And I think essentially what's happening now is you're getting a sort of dog whistle type politics where people are playing the race card by referring to this issue. But in reality, it's a tremendous backward step. You've got to realise that the speech that was given in Munich was at a security conference. And in many ways, the atmosphere within society now is a very conservative one with a small c, and this is all driven by fear. It is driven by the issue of terrorism in this country, and also by general issues to what extent the West has been condescending in terms of its foreign policy.
Right.
I'm being quite euphemistic really when I'm saying that.
But wouldn't
in terms of believing its role is to intervene around the world.
Okay, but within the UK, I mean, David Cameron as the Prime Minister, surely he would have been a coward to have just, ignored the topic outright. People do feel a fear of different cultures coming in. We're talking about extremism, whether it's, the English Defence League or it's Muslim extremists, that is an issue. If you invite everyone into this country, how do you actually sort through the type of people that you do want?
No, I don't think it was a matter of courage at all to start referring for those of the Islamic faith as if on a general basis they are so uncivilized that they're forcing a whole cohort of their young women into forced marriages or kidnapping them, which is some of the things that he said in his speech. I don't think that's a matter of courage. I think it's entirely hypocritical of him to talk about this issue when there are cuts to teaching for people who are not proficient in English, and in English as a second language teaching. If you're in favour of some kind of integration, that's what you should be providing, not cutting.
Right, okay. Rob, just turning to you, we've talked about religion and people integrating. Sometimes people want to actually refer to culture and religion as two separate things. And I think sometimes it's important to find that differentiation. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that actually what we're talking about here is culture and not people's belief systems. But people's belief systems influence their culture.
Right. Okay.
So
no, obviously they're joined, yeah, but at the same time, I think it's
Yeah. So I wouldn't see this as about a religious war or some kind of religious.
But when people are
religious
discussing
clash, 'cause it's not about
multiculturalism,
theology, it's about the way in which we get.
Yeah, but do you think people actually confuse the two and end up mixing them together? And is that what causes some of the tension sometimes?
I think there are groups of people in our society who don't want change. Right? They don't want to understand that meeting and mixing with people who are different is going to create something new and possibly better. And they were trying to resist that, and they will suggest it's either religion. If you look at our far right parties, they move from colour to religion to culture very easily, which seems to be a moving target for them.
Okay.
Isn't that then when education comes in? With all these cuts from education, we don't have the opportunities that we were doing. We had set up video conferences for this year where we were working with schools in other countries so that we could share what maths is like here, what maths is like in India and America, etc. Funding goes, it's gone straight away. We also have a global awareness month here and also an activity which has been great. It's been a real success where all the different cultures come in for music, for dance, for poetry, for food. And this is the one time where we do celebrate all the different ethnic cultures in our society. However, that's only done once a year. These are the things that need to be done more.
Okay.
And on the topic of religion and culture, I do think that people get those confused. I think people will say, oh, he's a Muslim, she's a Muslim, and therefore she's an extremist. All Muslims are the same. Well, we know that's not true. There are so many different groups within the Muslim community, just as there are under the Christian umbrella. And to pigeonhole all these people into the same thing, just because of something you've seen on TV or someone's inaccurate information that's been passed on.
Right. Let's move to the audience now. Just wrapping up this half of the programme. Just staying with this whole issue of religion and culture and the differentiation between that, do you think that does cause issues? Do you think people get religion and culture mixed up sometimes? Someone else who hasn't participated, young lady on the right, would you like to add? Throughout the whole discussion we've been having this half of the programme, what's your views on it? What are the issues in multiculturalism and how can we get over that?
I sometimes think parents can influence a child. If they don't want you to mix with a certain religion, they'll tell you to stay away. Or if they see something on the news, based on the safety of your own child, they'll tell you to keep a distance, but respect them, but keep your distance at the same time.
Okay.
So.
And anyone else who hasn't had a point of view yet in this half? Let's get some more.
I do believe your upbringing by your parents dictates how you look on another religion or culture. Your parents might say, stay away from the Islamic culture or Muslims because you're a Catholic, and don't mix with them, but keep your respect for them, building on what the point that she made before. But then again, that would then cause people not to integrate. But at the school, that's where I think schools should take part for children. They should teach them and show them that integration could be beneficial to them.
Okay, all right, thanks for that point of view. We need to take a short break. But stay with us. In part 2, we're going to be carrying on this discussion of multiculturalism, so don't go anywhere.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid.
An interlingual channel promoting interfaith dialogue, worldwide, live and interactive, on satellite television and the internet. This is MTA International.
Welcome back to the show. We're here in St. Joseph's College in London discussing multiculturalism. Now, in the second half of the show, we're going to be having a look at race, but also look at culture and seeing if we still have a class system here in the UK. Before we get the discussion going off, let's take a listen to the word on the street.
Walking down any street in Britain today, many outsiders will see a wealth of culture and religion. Multiculturalism has become a fabric of our society, so much so that the diversity we see every day is what defines this country. London in particular is seen as a melting pot of cultures, where over 300 languages are spoken and approximately 30% of the people were born outside England. However, in recent times we have seen increasingly negative reports to the downsides of multiculturalism and the impact it's having on our society. Minority groups have been accused of forming ghettos and not integrating enough in the society. Leaders in Germany, France and the UK have all admitted that multicultural society has failed. Is this really the case? How can we as individuals fix a society which so many claim is broken? To answer some of these questions, I went to meet Dr. Prakash Shah, who is a senior lecturer in religion and law at the University of London. Welcome to the interview, Dr. Prakash. The first question, if a nation states that it accommodates ethnic and religious minorities, what does it actually mean?
That's a very interesting question. First of all, maybe we can ask, what does it mean to accommodate? If you look at least one of the dictionary definitions of accommodation, it basically means adjustment. So the basic question is, how does a country which has maybe been influenced by immigrants, by immigrant cultures and their descendants, how is it changing and adapting in response to the presence of people who bring in different ways of life, different ways of thinking, different moral structures and so on into the larger whole. So it's basically a question of adjustment.
I've heard that liberal state now must adopt policies which are intended to integrate and respect its minorities. What are Britain's policies?
That's a brilliant question. Well, first of all, it's good that you introduced the idea of the liberal state, because actually in the Western context, largely we are talking about liberal states, right? And what does it mean to be a liberal state? It seems to be that liberal states are those where the dominant ideological framework, the dominant moral framework is one which is informed by liberalism. And it seems to me that at least part of the problem is that very framework of liberalism. So when politicians like David Cameron and so on assert that we should take a more muscular liberal line, This actually can alienate members of other cultural communities in a Western society like Britain, because it seems like the implication is that others are expected to give up their ancestral traditions, their cultural values, their ethical norms and so on, and conform to the norms which are posited by liberalism.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned David Cameron here. Recently we've heard other political leaders as well from other nations across Europe, including Mr. Cameron, saying multiculturalism has failed. What does he actually mean by that, and how can you analyze the success of multiculturalism?
Your question is quite interesting. How far should multicultural societies actually go in respecting this kind of difference? I think we need a deep debate in Western societies, in all Western societies, not just Britain, about the extent to which we are prepared to accept a value pluralism, not just a cultural pluralism, but a deeper set of diverse ethical value systems. At the moment, what seems to happen is that, well, liberals will say, okay, on the one hand, we can point to your religious texts, right, to show that, well, you have a totally different moral or value system. Muslims are a prime example of the way in which they are stereotyped by reference to their religious texts and so on. But sometimes it's not possible to resort to a text. So a liberal, a person who is coming from a liberal perspective will say, let's look at the way in which that person is acting, right? Normally, we wouldn't have a problem with the way in which he or she is acting. But if we begin to imply some kind of moral principle which explains the way that person is acting, liberals begin to have huge problems with that.
Thank you, Dr. Prakash. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
So that was the word on the street. And Rob, if I could just get the discussion started off with you. Before we were talking about race, but now I want to ask, do you think there's still a class system here in the UK?
Definitely. I think we have a real challenge in our society with social mobility. So we're now in a situation where people don't have as much opportunity to move up the class scale as they may have done 30 or 40 years ago. And the problem is that it's not an efficient way of running a society when people don't have good opportunities and the ability to live up, to fulfill their potential. That said, race is still important as well. Recent data has suggested that the gap between Black Caribbean children's achievement and white children's achievement is about a year at the age 14. And something like 10 months of that year can be explained not by class but by race. So race is still important too.
Okay. Suzanne, I mean, what have you seen in terms of the development of this society over the last few years? Do you think we're actually improving in terms of class issues that we just discussed there?
No, I don't. I still think a lot of it is to do with who you know, what school you went to, what universities you get into. Sadly, for many of our minority students, they're not given the opportunity to even apply to those schools because that's got to start in secondary school. They've got to be told and encouraged to try and apply to what in America we call the Ivy League schools, the top-notch schools, to give them the same opportunities. And I don't think that right now we're doing that for our students. We'll say, well, don't bother with that. You're not going to get in, so let's just try for this one instead. So I think even we as teachers start very early by saying, well, this is beyond you. And yet, or sometimes we'll say, you don't have the money, which is true, but then what should be allowed for that? Maybe scholarship should be something that they can encourage students who are from ethnic backgrounds, or from any background actually, who have the grades, have the know-how, but just can't afford to do it.
Andrew, turning to you, a lot of people, a lot of the commentators who are against multiculturalism say that people come into this country, they're not achieving at school, they have high crime rates as well. Do you think that's because of their culture or just because of the fact that they come from poor backgrounds? And do you think class and money is maybe the main issue here and not actually culture?
Well, I think that if people are indeed saying that about minorities, that's an appalling generalisation that they're getting involved in. But I do think that society is regressing in terms of opportunities for people. My experience in Parliament was that many people who I knew there were at college with me at Oxford. And something is wrong with society when essentially they're picking their leaders from a very small number of a very small strata of society. In many ways, and it probably plays up to the what you might describe as the prejudices of some people watching us overseas. But unfortunately, England is very much about class warfare, and it's a class warfare primarily between those people who went to Eton and those people who went to other public schools. So small is the strata from which people are being drawn from to lead our country. In many ways, our government now, which is full of millionaires and full of people who went to Eton or Magdalen College, Oxford, it's a kind of government you could have had in Edwardian times. So something is badly wrong. And I was fortunate to go to a public school as a result of the 11 plus. And if you look at British politics, there was a while when Margaret Thatcher wasn't very popular, but she wasn't a public school girl. Ted Heath wasn't a public school girl. Sorry, public school boy. Sorry, my apologies. No intent in there about Edward Heath. And then Jim Callaghan as well. So we've society is going backwards, and as was being said earlier on the panel, that's bad news for any society if it can't have a degree of social mobility that creates efficiency and creates performance and is dynamic, because dynamism dies when such social mobility isn't possible.
Okay, so Robert, if this is the issue, how do we get over that? How do we tackle this?
How do we solve this class system?
Yeah,
I think, firstly, being relentless in pursuing equality. So we make sure that people have an equal opportunity. And that I think is a minimum. Yet too often, we see discrimination happening which keeps some groups out based on name or what school they went to or what university they went to. Secondly, I would argue that this issue is important enough to consider positive action. So you would look at supporting particular groups who may be struggling to make it into certain professions or certain spaces. And if that doesn't work, maybe it's worth trying, as they do in America and India, affirmative action. And I don't rush to that conclusion, but I think if we think this is important enough, we may have to do something in that vein.
Okay, let's get the audience involved in the discussion. We're talking about class, and do you think when people talk to you, they judge you by your race or by class, your sort of, how rich you are and your sort of upbringing and the kind of schools you went to? Do you think they actually stereotype you maybe from that point of view? Got some hands raised up here.
I do believe they do stereotype you and affiliate you with your race and class to an extent, and then you tend to mix with that. You tend to stay at that level because the stereotype, you find it easier, and then you tend to not progress. You don't mix with other people or integrate with other people who are of a higher class, and you feel segregated off from them, and you just tend to stick to your group.
Okay, gentleman in the front.
First of all, I strongly believe that as individuals we are the architects of our future.
Yeah, okay.
I don't care what anybody else thinks about me. If the person judges me just because of the color of my skin, that is that person's loss. And then coming back to a point that Susan made, I would rather die than turn around to a child and say, no, you cannot go to that university. Even if there are no blacks in that university, you can be the first black that goes to that university. If that's what you want, you can do it. Don't let the fact that there's no blacks or there are no Asians in that university, don't let that be the reason why you don't pursue that goal. For example, I think it was my first year of teaching. I'd been noticing this child. He plays football so perfectly. And one day I turned around and said, so what are your intentions? Are you playing for a club right now? He turned around to me and said, sir, have you seen any Asians in the Premiership?
Yeah.
I mean, he saw the look I gave him. Because now he felt because there are no Asians who play football at that top level. But then he had the skills. So I told him, why don't you be the first Asian that will play for a top flight team?
That would be his inspiration to go forward.
So I strongly believe, yeah, we can come up with all the excuses. But that would be the reason why we won't succeed. We are actually the architects of our
Fantastic.
future.
All right, we'll leave it there. Turning back to the panelists, is it the fact that people from minorities don't have the role models then to go forward in life? And if so, how do we actually inspire this next generation of youngsters to be the role models for future generations? Suzanne, what would you like to say on that?
Not only the role models, do they not have the role models, but also the know-how, how to make it, what are the steps needed to get to this place. Yes, definitely. I think, sadly, with the broken home situation, you know, and many of us come from them, there may not be the fathers in the home. And then you've got a mother struggling to raise children on her own. And talking as a single parent, you know, I had to go through that. I was also raised by a single parent who was a father. So back in the 60s, that really was a unique situation. But you know, we weren't allowed to use that as an excuse. And we were told very early on, you will not say you come from a single home, you will not say this, and you will push. And I was told very early on, you're going to be black and a woman to the day you die. So they are not excuses you can use. You have to push yourself forward. And I think as parents, we need to instill that in our children.
I mean,
it will be tougher.
Yeah.
It's going to be tougher. You know, I've got somebody who's coming from, you know, say Oxford, and I'm coming from this no-name university, and we're both going for a job. I have to present myself in such a light, you know, so well, oversell myself, because his dad might be somebody with a name that we know and he could walk in. Sadly, that is still happening. And, you know, it's great to say we're architects of our own future, but sometimes you need that little push or
to be realistic
ease
about
up,
the situation,
because I can say I want to do this and I want to do it and I've got all the brains to do it, but if I can't afford to do it, can't afford to get myself that education, then what?
All right, fantastic. Let's move to the audience again. And I want to keep this discussion going about sort of the class backgrounds that we have. We're talking about education, your potential for the future. Do you think your potential is, you know, set by the background that you come from and how rich maybe your parents were? Let's get points of view.
I think that if your parents have previously been to university and things like that, that they'll have better contacts and the better know-how of how to get into a specific sector of work or something, especially like with banking and stuff, with the internships and people being able to like, oh yeah, my mum knows this person or my dad knows this person, so I'm easily going to get it. So that depends on class, but then it's harder for people that have no contacts or no previous background with anything.
So you're saying
like
it's quite difficult at the moment to break that class background as well? Yeah, okay. Bringing the discussion back to integration, obviously we're sort of touching on education as well. A lot of people say that whoever comes to this country, they have to learn the language and they have to learn the core values of what it is to be British. I mean, Andrew, what is it to be British, first of all, and how do you think we should promote that?
I remember you had somebody here on the previous programme who was an advisor to the select committee that I was on, the Education Select Committee, and I think a member of Parliament had the temerity to ask a head teacher, you know, do you teach British values? And that head teacher posed the question back to MPs, you know, what are British values? And we really struggled to give an answer. It was extremely embarrassing. You know, I think that when people talk about British values, they tend to be rather vague. For example, if we talk about democracy, you can construct an argument that we don't live in a terribly democratic country in terms of the way in which the government rules in the name of the Queen. For example, we can wage war without Parliament deciding. But I suppose if you were to go for rather soft values, I suppose it's trying to be polite and it's about fair play. Very often when you knock on doors and talk to voters, they talk about a sense of fair play. So maybe that's it's all about it not being cricket, perhaps.
Fantastic. That's a great way to put it. Robert, what would you like to add into that discussion? It seems to be, you know, the key question at the moment. What is it to be British and how do
It is, and it's the complete hole at the centre of this argument around multiculturalism, because the Prime Minister and others want to suggest that there are this set of core British values that somehow aren't experienced in other countries. So, you know, if you could say a sense of fair play, the Germans would probably say they've got a sense of fair play as well. You know, and the question is about who defines it. So we think that a multiculture should be delivering a space in which we're having this constant discussion about what our values are, what is it that we share, what is it that we think is important, and that our democracy, such as it is, ought to be a really good space for that to happen. Currently, because it's only certain, well, because there are so few people from the broad range of backgrounds in leadership positions, and in that discussion, we get a very narrow sense of what those values are, and so we end up kind of floundering around saying, well, it could be a bit of this or a bit of that. It's not very easy for people then to integrate into it.
Susan's just saying to you, I mean, do you teach Britishness in school? Is there a set sort of syllabus or something?
I don't know what Britishness is. I consider myself to be British, so, and I teach, so together. I don't, you know, and this is again, because we are living in a multicultural society here, that what is Britishness? You know, and I do think when people come over to learn the language, not to be forced to, but to learn the language will help them. Yeah. Because to go to any country and live there and not know the language is already, you know, alienating you from a large member of, you know, being a member of the community. So I think it is important that you learn. I also think that when you come to a new country, you need to understand the way that the education system works, the way the job market works. These are all things you need to know. When I moved to America for a few years, I had to learn all that. I had to learn all the different nuances and just the little things. And I thought it was the same country speaking the same language. It is not the same language. And then coming back after 20-something years, I had to do it all over again. Just to be able to survive, you have to become part of the society. Whether we like it or not, we all have to come to find that niche that we can fit in, to find out how we can make it from one step to the other.
Okay. Coming back to the audience, we've got some hands raised. I just want to get.
In terms of Britishness being put into students at school, I don't, as a student in a British school, I don't feel that that's put into students, and I feel that if you, as a government, want that to be put into students in school, then maybe local communities need to come together more and then report back to the government so that they can see what's going on. Because in schools, it's not really clear to us what Britishness is, if you can define it.
Okay, yeah, just quickly, I want to get some more points of view. Yeah,
I think Britishness, which is the topic, can't always be defined because times are always changing and you've got to adapt to what's different. That's why culture, religion and race has to adapt, because maybe a couple centuries, like a couple decades ago, people were more racist in a sense where everybody was segregated, but now because times have changed, people have to adapt to living. Let's say you can live next door to anybody now and it doesn't matter. So therefore, you can't always define the meaning of a culture because you're always changing to adapt to the society you live in.
All right, yep, yeah, what would you like to add in?
I think that to be British, as of now, is to come into the country, fit in, don't get in trouble and make the economy go up. But then what I think it should be is that everyone should be able to tolerate each other and put up with each other's ideals as they are now.
Okay, just running out of time now. I want to get some concluding remarks on the panelists. Rob, if I could just start with you. From the whole discussion we've had today about multiculturalism, about racism and integration, I mean, how would you like to leave the discussion and what kind of message would you like to give our viewers around the world?
I would say that there is a potential for a really exciting, progressive project multiculturalism offers. To create something really new for people from all around the world living in one space and sharing one space. But in order for it to happen, we need to be relentless about equality to make sure discrimination doesn't happen, and also create spaces for people to actually really meet and interact with each other.
Okay, and Suzanne, turning to you.
More needs to be done in the classroom with our students. However, that will not help unless we use the community services that are available for the parents. Because if we can talk to the students in class, but they have to go home and meet with parents who've got their own fears, apprehensions about other cultures, then we've lost the whole game right there. So we need to make use of community centres where parents can meet and where they can discuss and we can share. Maybe start off with a global awareness activity where people come in and let's share the different cultures, bring in different foods, do an Indian night, do an Pakistani night, a Welsh night, an Irish night, a Jamaican night, so that they can see what it's like and see that we really all are the same with similar beliefs.
Okay, fantastic. And Andrew, what would be your concluding remarks?
I think your point about a global analysis is a very pertinent one, because you have Merkel and Sarkozy and Cameron all being critical of multiculturalism. Even Trevor Phillips has been critical of multiculturalism.
Right, yeah.
So at the present moment, I think in reality multiculturalism is in retreat and is important for people who believe in a progressive society to be fighting the cause. That multiculturalism is indeed perhaps, as the audience has just said, what Britishness is about, and we must defend it as strongly as we can.
Okay, well, it's good to leave on such a positive message at the end. You've heard what the panelists have got to say, you've heard what the audience have said, but we want to hear your points of view as well. Don't forget you can get in contact with us on our email address, which is realtalk@mta.tv. Also visit our website where you can catch previous issues of the programs and find out what we're discussing in the future as well. If you've got any suggestions for, maybe topics for the next program, or you want us to come and film a program where you are, do let us know. And for the latest news on Real Talk, make sure you stay in touch with us via our Twitter, which is MTA_Real Talk. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this program, but once again I want to thank everyone here. I want to thank the management of St. Joseph's College as well for their hospitality. I hope you can join us again for the next Real Talk, but until then, Assalamu alaikum.